Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Donae. I am an ADHD executive functioning coach and an occupational therapist. And my goal here is to provide tools for you if you struggle with executive functioning skills to make life easier. Today, I want to talk about a topic that comes up a lot with people I work with, which is parenting when you have different sensory needs than your children. And this can cause a lot of guilt. This is a really common scenario that I run into, is that the parent is extremely overwhelmed sensory-wise by life with kids. And let me be real here. Kids are like a sensory onslaught. I love them. They're amazing, but they are all motion and touch and celebration and noise. And if you are somebody who interprets a lot of sensory information as overwhelming or even threatening, that can be a real challenge because kids do not shut that off. They can't shut it off. And this becomes a challenge, is that this is the needs of your kid and your needs. A common approach is for people just to stuff that down and say, okay, I need to push through. I need to power through this. What kind of a mom can't stand being around her kids, right? This is something that causes a lot of guilt. And when you have a lot of guilt, guess what you have a little bit of, or none? Problem solving. Because when we have a lot of guilt, we want to avoid that topic. We want to ignore what's true about that topic, and we just want to just brush right over it and not deal with it. There are things you can do to help yourself. We all have different bodies, different nervous systems, different needs in this area. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. This is just what's true for your body, and we're going to help you find some ways to work with that. Now, I don't want to overpromise here because this is a difficult situation, right? This is a real life situation. My children are older. My children are teenagers. It's easier in that phase of life to say, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tapping out, I'll be over here, you do your thing. When you have younger kids or kids with a lot of needs that you need to help with, you don't always have that option. But one thing that I want to encourage parents to do is to not ignore their needs altogether and not to say, I don't have this option, therefore what can I do? Because what happens often is that we get pushed and pushed by sensory overload. And then we're at a place where we're totally dysregulated. We no longer really have choices. Our body's just like, later, that looks different for different people. Dysregulation can look different for different people. For some people, that means totally shutting down and dipping really low and going into shutdown cocoon mode. For some people, that means like exploding or snapping or having this kind of external experience. I'm elevated and I'm really easily triggered and angry. All of these are challenging because we want to be able to have choices and not just have our body sign off on us. What we're going to talk about today is a way for you to work with your own nervous system if this isn't an easy fit for you. One reframe that I think can be really helpful, especially because many of us who have ADHD or sensory issues, because there's some heritable aspects of these, have children that will have some of these same struggles if they don't already currently. And so when you are modeling advocating for yourself, when you're modeling taking care of yourself, and even just using this language of what you need sensory-wise, you're helping your kids. You're helping your kids learn this vocabulary, learn these ideas, and be able to advocate for themselves as well. Moms in particular have a hard time of just doing something for themselves because it's for them. So if you need this extra bit of encouragement, you are doing this for your kids as well. It's a tool they really need, and they're going to be ahead of the game if they already have this knowledge about themselves as well. So what can you do? What can you do when you are finding, hey, the sensory information I'm getting from my environment, including my beloved children, is not a fit for me? I'm really feeling dysregulated. It's too much. I'm overwhelmed. I'm shutting down. I'm about to blow. What can you do? This isn't always easy with young kids, but one thing to aim to do is to remove yourself. Get a sensory break. That looks different depending on your children, depending on their ages, depending on the support you have. I know that might take some problem solving and creativity and maybe even pulling in other people to help you, but you deserve the break. You might functionally need the break. If this is a challenging fit for you, prioritizing and building some breaks from that sensory information that you're getting, it may be really important. Maybe a way you can support yourself. Number 2, talk about it. Talk about it with your children. If your kids are very young, that might be limited. That's okay. Start talking about it. We start talking about concepts they're not ready for all the time, right? You want to include this in your language with your kids and explain what you're experiencing. Explain this in terms of body sensations. Now, If you have ADHD or you have some sensory issues or both, this can be hard. A lot of people with ADHD experience like being disconnected from their bodies. Like they may not get these signs of, ooh, I've got this tightening in my throat and this fluttering in my stomach and this warmth in my face, or all the different ways that we connect in our bodies, these feelings that we're experiencing, to what our nervous system state or emotional state is. This is a little bit of a learning curve for some of us. Many people with ADHD struggle with interoception, the noticing and perceiving of this internal experience. Some of us struggle with attention regulation, might be tuning into it till we're way far down the dysregulation path. If that's you, this is a skill you can practice like any other skill. You'll get better at it. And it's a skill that really helps kids to understand. When they can connect their emotional state with the sensations in their body, they're going to have a much easier time regulating and be able to make choices, because they get like some advanced notice. Ooh, I'm getting so irritated, and this is what it feels like in my body. This is how I experience this. They get a little head start. For many of us who deal with this, we're not connected to that. And so we suddenly find ourselves in this tipping point, and we never had a chance to get what we needed to adjust our environment. So one of the things that you can do is start noticing and trying to notice what it feels like when you are really overwhelmed sensory wise, and start explaining it to your kids. Right now, all of the sounds are making my throat feel smaller, and it's making my stomach feel fluttery, and I'm starting to feel hot. That's how I know I need a break. So I'm gonna go outside for a second and do some stretches outside. You keep playing, you keep enjoying your trucks, but I'm gonna take a little break. I have kids. I know that may not go according to script. Your child might melt down because you're leaving the room, and I get it. This is not a one and done. This is the beginning of language around this. So you can advocate for yourself and even teach your kids how to start doing this and connecting these sensations to being dysregulated and being able to make choices that help their bodies out. So removing yourself is one option. Starting to have discussions around sensory input, regulation, how that feels in your body is another one. Another idea is dulling down sensory input. Of course, you gotta look at your situation and how much you can dull down that information and still feel safe and do what you need to do. But noise canceling headphones, decreasing visual overwhelm, whichever ways you can do it. With young kids, there's a lot of life. There's a lot of what I would call clutter in motion. If you find that dysregulating, all of that extra visual input, there's an in-between that's still livable, that's not, I'm gonna clean everything else up and live in this like pristine museum house, or I'm gonna ignore this and just get overwhelmed by all this input. Think of putting blinders on, however you need to do that. Maybe that's just having a really quick bin to throw things in that you don't have to look at. Maybe that's just choosing to be in a room that has a little less activity going on. Getting creative about how you can see less, how you can get less visual input if that's what you need in that moment. Getting outside, if that helps. Finding ways to actually meet your needs rather than just powering through and expecting it to be different. Touch. This is a really tricky one. I'm not going to pretend this is an easy one to help you with. If you're touched out, people get touched out. People that love their kids get touched out. People that love their kids want them to stop climbing on them and even hugging them sometimes. Think about this as your sensory needs. This is not a measure of the love you have of your kids, right? This is just you as a sensory being. You might be touched out. What can you do with that? This is art, not science. You've got to balance your own needs, the needs of your kids, your values, all of these things, but don't let your own needs not enter into that equation. Sometimes you just need a little space. And if you're in a situation where you can't be disengaged with your kids, or you don't choose to or want to be disengaged, sometimes your young kids, you can still be playful and connected and create that space. When I worked as an OT, we would do this game called the pizza game. We would take a yoga ball and I would roll this over the child that I was working with, because I was rolling out the dough and then I was bouncing on them. I'm putting on the toppings, but I had this game that would give them a lot of proprioceptive feedback. We're gonna talk about that in a minute, but it gave them a lot of this nervous system regulating input, which is this proprioceptive input, this input to their body, their muscles, their joints, all of this, getting this kind of what we call neutral warmth, just this pressure. And it was fun, we were connected. If I was a mom that was like touched out and my child still wanted to connect with me, they could get some of that nice pressure, that warmth, that fun, that playfulness, and it gave me a little break sensory-wise. That's just one idea that came to my mind. I'm sure the creative people out there will come up with tons more, but understanding that you can keep that connection and still honor your need for a touch break. So what I just talked about in terms of proprioceptive input is something that I talk a lot about when I'm looking at sensory strategies to help us regulate, help us get in that nice middle zone where we can focus, we feel calm enough to do life. It's our sweet spot. And proprioceptive input is one of the amazing tools that you can use that can help you get to that spot if you're feeling really low and draggy, if you're feeling super overstimulated and running really high. Either way, that kind of input can help you get to that center, a little more calm place. So what is this proprioceptive input? Proprioceptive input is input to your muscles and joints that kind of gives your brain this feedback about where you are. And so if you were right now to close your eyes and you were to pick up one leg, you could keep your eyes closed and probably take your finger of the other hand and just touch your knee, right? You did that without your vision because of your proprioceptive system. That's letting your brain know, okay, because the muscles and the joints and where I am, my knee's about here. And so we use input to the system to help us regulate our nervous system. It's really helpful. When you're regulating your nervous system, then you can focus better, you have better energy, you're calmer, all these things happen for you and it's a lot easier to function. So this is a great tool to have no matter what, even if you don't have a misfit with your kids and your sensory needs. But if you do, this is a really good tool to tap into. And so what does that look like? What does that look like functionally? It looks like any input to your muscles and joints. So it can look like exercise. It doesn't have to be exercise. There's more passive ways to get that input. So running, jumping, walking, being on the trampoline, doing a plank, doing a wall sit, right? Pushing, pulling. A lot of exercise does that, but there's also more passive ways to do that too, like getting some deep pressure, some massage, being able to stretch. There's ways of various intensity that you can do this, and there's also ways that fit maybe your time demands that you can do this. And it's something you can do with your kids. So if you're feeling really dysregulated, finding a way together to get a lot of this proprioceptive input might actually help them regulate as well. I've noticed in coaching and just in life, moms feel guilty. I don't know, it's like a default. Every mom I know, amazing moms that I know, I work with, my friends, sisters, they feel guilty a lot. Moms who have ADHD and executive functioning issues feel really guilty. It's always coming up. They're always feeling they're not making it, they're not measuring the mark, right? So we're already dealing with this tendency towards guilt. Guilt's not helpful. It's judgmental. It doesn't really help you with problem solving. It really shuts down problem solving, and you can't really find good solutions, good supports when you're stuck in this guilty place. So if you are somebody who really finds this sensory misfit, you're not a bad mom. I'm sure you're a wonderful mom or dad, right? None of my dads that I work with tell me they feel guilty about this. When this topic comes up, this it sometimes does in coaching, there is deep guilt and shame about this. And it's really sad and unfair because this is not a moral failing. This is not a parent failing. This is just a difference in your body, a difference in your nervous system, and there's things that you can do to work with that. So if you don't believe this yourself, I am here to tell you that having a misfit between what your body needs sensory-wise and your environment, even if that environment includes your beloved, precious little munchkins, right? That does not mean anything other than just that. Right? Honoring your sensory needs is a really important thing to model for them. Many of our kids, if we're in the neurodivergent camp, are there with us, right? They need these skills, and neurotypical kids need them too. These are really important skills. If there is one skill that I think people really struggle with and lack on a whole in our culture today, it's the ability to regulate their emotions. And this ties directly into that. So you being able to advocate for yourself, talk about this with your children in an age-appropriate way. There probably is no too early because this is just good information to know about our bodies. So wrapping up, if you're someone who struggles in this area, this is just a difference, a sensory difference. You having this difference might actually benefit your kids in the long run. They're gonna have tools and skills modeled by you that everybody needs. Be kind to yourself. Parenting's hard, and parenting when you have sensory differences and sensory challenges just adds one more layer to that. If you made it to the end of this, you care enough about your kids and about yourself. You're working at this. You're trying to find the answers you need. You're doing a great job. So good luck with trying out these strategies, and I will see you next time.